Hello everyone, I'm Jen Calleja and today I'm interviewing Richard Phoenix, my sometime bandmate, currently lockdown flatmate, and
husband.
No. And because of lockdown, Richard isn't able to launch his pamphlet D.I.Y as Privilege, a Manifesto, which just came out with Rough Trade Books. So I'll tell you a little bit about Richard and about the pamphlet. The pamphlet was originally a one-page manifesto and is a poignant and funny pamphlet that documents over a decade of experiences, both supporting musicians with learning disabilities and being part of a DIY punk scene. Through anecdotes, observations and the voices of the people Richard's met along the way, he shares moments that have stayed with him and shows us how he re-evaluated his perception of do-it-yourself culture. And the pamphlet features artists such as Daniel Wakeford, Perty Kurikan, Nimi Paivat, The Fish Police, Beat Express, Robin Stewart, Electric Fire and more. A little bit about Richard. Richard Phoenix is an artist living and working in London who uses painting, drawing, writing, interaction and music to learn about how people can be together. He has worked with learning disability arts organisations and individual artists and musicians since 2006 as a facilitator, collaborator and project coordinator. He is currently artist in residence in the Tate Schools and Teachers Department and associate artist for organisation Heart and Soul based in Deptford. His involvement within the UK's DIY music scene includes being in the bands Sawney Youth, Monotony, Child's Pose, The Steel and Captain Everything, among others, and his own artistic practice informs his interest in how accessibility and inclusion can improve things for all. Okay, here we go.
Here we go. Great introduction. Thank you.
So obviously I've been able to witness how busy you've been the last few weeks.
Right, yeah.
Endlessly busy.
Yeah.
In some respects things haven't changed too much, but in others they've changed a lot. Could you give us a bit of an insight into what your kind of day-to-day life has been in the last month or so in terms of work, your artistic practice and how you've been relaxing?
Okay.
Question mark.
So lockdown has affected me in terms of work in a really interesting way. I work as an associate artist for Heart and Soul, which is based in Deptford, and a lot of what we do is like event based and also in person. There's a lot of activities and kind of sessions that are done like with people. Obviously we're not able to do that. We actually sort of shut down a bit earlier than a lot of other places because a lot of people we work with are particularly vulnerable. And since then the organisation Heart and Soul has been incredible at actually supporting all the freelancers they work with, all the staff, and giving us the opportunity to really explore how we can carry on supporting people creatively in this period of time. And so I've been on the computer a lot, on Zoom a lot. You've heard some of my sessions.
I have.
So one band that I work with, Electric Fire, we're doing weekly meetups. I mean, it took about 3-4 weeks to get everybody on Zoom, which is the platform we've been using mainly. And then through that process of getting everybody on, we've been learning a lot about, you know, what access people have to the internet and to computers and to phones and all this sort of stuff. But we've actually now started writing songs together over Zoom, which has just been amazing to see. You know, I've been getting messages all today from one of the singers, Alicia, who's been recording herself playing keyboard and singing and then WhatsApping those over, and then I can put them into like we use Ableton Live a lot. And then apart from that, been working on radio shows for Soho Radio. So Heart and Soul has a regular show on there. And I need to talk louder. We have a show on Soho Radio, and we've been ringing people up that are involved with that and recording them, and then also been figuring out our young people's program, getting young people online and doing creative activities with facilitators on there, and that's been going really, really well, and been maybe the highlight of lockdown. Is getting sort of 30 to 40 young people onto Zoom, and chaos ensuing, but in a really beautiful, joyful way. So lots of experimenting, lots of being on Zoom, but actually it's been really fun and really interesting figuring out how to create access for the people that I work with. So busy.
Yeah. The only reason why I gave you the prompt to be louder is because from about 9 till 5 you're literally shouting your head off on Zoom, and now it's time to talk. You're like,
Yeah, I need the headphones to sort of...
But what about your art practice? Because
you did ask me about that.
I did ask you. On Fridays, you've kind of set aside time to paint, mainly Fridays.
Mondays and Fridays.
Yeah.
Mondays was my day. So I'm a part of a studio program in Croydon called Conditions. And I've been doing that for about a year and a half. I'm not going to go too in depth into what it is, but it's been really amazing at changing my artistic practice and bringing things together in terms of work, supporting people to make art and music. And then my painting practice and musical practice as well. And so I've tried to ring fence those days, and got Monday and Friday, and I've been trying to paint as much as I can. I typically paint in oil paints, but I can't do that at home because I know I'll get it all over the house because I'm very messy. So I've been using acrylics, which I don't normally use. And I've been having to use like scraps of materials, but I think what I've predominantly been painting about is work, I think, and the nature of work, and these images which are coming to me when I'm drawing about the way that work for me has changed. And I'm really interested in desks and tables and the role that they play within our lives, and now playing a lot more in my life. But it's been going well, and I've started a support pledge thing, the artist support pledge, and I've been selling some works online, which has been nice.
And the art support pledge is that you sell artworks for no more than £200.
Yeah.
And then when you make £1,000, you buy someone else's work for £200.
Yeah. And the whole idea is sort of artists creating a bit of an ecosystem for themselves, which I really like, and the concept is resonates with me, and I'm nearly at the point of buying somebody else's work, so it's exciting.
And very briefly, what's been your favourite way of relaxing? Because you're a terrible relaxer, but you have been doing, TV relaxing.
Yeah, I've been reading a lot.
Yeah.
And
what are you reading at the moment?
Reading Black and British by I can't remember the author's name right now, which is been really fascinating to read. And then I've read a bunch of books that have been published by
Les Fugitifs.
Yeah, Les Fugitifs, which is a French publisher.
They publish French literature by women in translation.
Yeah, so I've read a couple of books published by them. It's been very good.
You've been basically reading all my books.
Yeah.
Great. So now that was just to warm you up. Okay, so obviously you start off the pamphlet talking about how you got into being in bands, or the kind of right at the beginning. So I want to know, how did you get started playing in DIY punk bands? Where did it start for you? What did it give you in your life, or what can you recognise that it gave you, right from the beginning? And then how did that transition into you working in disability art? I mean, obviously that's a lot of time to cover, like 50 years. So it's
going to feel like 50 years once I get to the end of it. So
I mean, briefly,
briefly,
really briefly. How did it start? Where did it start? Who did it start with? And then fast forward to you joining
50 years in the future
disability arts organisations.
Okay, so I'm going to try and be really condensed. I wanted to be in bands for years, and I played drums. My brother played guitar, and nothing ever really happened. The only band that of note was one called Discharge, with my brother and my friend, my best friend Andreas Conrath. We called ourselves Discharge because we saw a sticker on Max Cavalera from Sepultura's guitar that said Discharge, and we thought, that's a cool word. That'd make a great name for a band. Not knowing about the seminal punk band Discharge. So that's kind of how clueless we were as sort of the 13-year-old kids. But from that point on, I just really wanted to be in a band, and I would tell people that I really wanted to be in a band. And then I finally, around the age of 16, was put in touch with two guys, one called Lewis Froy and the other called John Whitehouse, who also really wanted to start a band. They were based in Watford, and they were looking for a drummer, and I was a drummer, and I knew how to play fast. So we met up and started a band.
Called Captain
Everything. And that band existed for me, it existed for 8 years. So from the age of 16 till I was 24.
Mm-hmm. And this was part of kind of the Watford music scene.
Yeah. And so I guess that was a big part of it, and that was one of the most important parts, was being a part of a music scene. So I guess alongside meeting these people that got to play music with, and were kind of taking it seriously, we wanted to write songs and want to record them and play gigs and all of these things which I'd always wanted to do. But alongside it came a group of friends and other people that want to do the same. We started putting on our own gigs. I ended up moving in with Lewis, and one of the rooms in the house we had as a rehearsal space. He bought a van. We started trying to book our own tours. The first one was hilariously, shambolic. We were we didn't have email addresses. This is 50 years ago, and I think when we played in Hull, what we'd done is we'd found a venue that another band had played, and rung up the venue and be like, "Can we have a gig?" And they're like, "Yeah, sure." So that was booked. So when we turned up, we were like, "Oh, where are all the flyers and posters and stuff?" And it's like, "Well, you booked it, so you're the promoters." And we thought nobody was going to turn up, but actually a bunch of people from Watford that had then gone to university in Hull had turned up, and we had a very good night. And then I got an appendicitis later on in the tour, and had to drop out, and blah 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 blah. But through that experience, got to know lots of people and kind of get this sense of community. And the Watford scene ended up becoming this really fruitful, like amazing music scene that produced a lot of like, you know, kind of well-known bands like Gallows and Sixth and I can't remember any other bands now, but it was wicked. It was really great, and I think that really stuck with me. But as a band, we ended up like spending about 4 years like touring kind of relentlessly, like sort of around nearly like up to like 200 gigs a year. Traveling a lot, going to Europe. We went to Canada, we went to Japan. In between that, we'd record, and yeah, it was pretty intense. And eventually, I think the sort of the tension between like doing something I really wanted to do, but then also like living at my mum's house. I think I moved back there and I didn't unpack, so I was like, this is a temporary thing. And then I basically was living in a room with a mattress and boxes for like 2 years. And we... Sexy. Bet you said you didn't meet me then. And yeah, I just, you know, I wanted a life, I guess, and to move out of home and all of this stuff. And so,
how old were you about?
So like 24.
Yeah, 24.
So I ended up just leaving the band, and I moved to Brighton because I really enjoyed going to Brighton whenever we played gigs there. And when I moved there, I signed on, and I think the one thing that really stuck with me was moving there was that the 4 years of building up this sense of community within being in the band, within being captain and everything, and then the 4 years of travelling and kind of jumping into other people's communities, and it getting to experience like the way that, you know, we'd be in somewhere for a day, but we can have like these connections with people, like really instant connections, because we're connecting through culture and art and music. And I think when I moved to Brighton, I really wanted to be a part of like a local community, because I felt like that period traveling really disconnected me from that. And I wanted to work in something creative. I ended up like working as a play worker for a while.
Your qualification in play work? Yeah,
that's like my last qualification. It's a GCSE in play work, but it's in me good stead. I think play work's amazing. But yeah, then I also wanted to do some kind of creative activity. So I went to there's a volunteer centre in Brighton, and they have these folders which you can look through, and I guess I was looking through creative arts ones and came across this organisation called Carousel that did a volunteer training scheme to train up volunteers to work with people with learning disabilities in the creative arts. And they did a film festival, they worked with a band called Be Express, they did a club called the Blue Camel Club. They did all this stuff, and it just sounded like cool and interesting, and the volunteer training course was like starting really soon, so I applied for it and got on the course, and then that was kind of the beginning.
And then obviously we met in Brighton, and you know, you've been in bands and done this work the whole time, and art as well. So it's like you've done all these things simultaneously.
Which I think is really important. I think when in the manifesto I talk a bit how I guess the hook, I was hooked and into kind of the work and supporting people with learning disabilities, and when I was supporting people to make music, I came across, I just felt it was really important that I had my own musical practice and artistic practice throughout, because I wanted to be as transparent as possible when I was supporting people. I think there's sort of difference between like collaboration and then facilitation. And I wanted to like really just support people to do what they wanted to do. And I wanted to be able to like be satisfied in my own creative practice so I didn't impose anything too much that I wanted to do within those sort of that supportive like environment.
That's really interesting. Not to hijack your interview, but it just made me think about being a writer and a translator, and how I often get the same kind of idea of, I put a lot of my own creative energy in writing into my own writing.
Yeah.
Which means I don't often feel like I have to kind of go full hog in translation when I'm translating someone else. So I understand that distinction.
Yeah. I mean, it's not to say that I'm an invisible presence in things. You know?
Like a translator.
Yeah, almost like a translator. Yeah, but I just felt, and also it's like I'm learning stuff through doing it, and I think what's come up again and again in like my job currently at Heart and Soul, a lot of it is to do with like making connections. And if I'm active within music or active within art, then it means that, you know, I'm still actively bringing in new connections and ideas, and I'm learning stuff that then I can bring back to the people I support. But that then conversely, like, I'm definitely at a point now where actually I really want to, well, I have been for a while, really draw a lot of ideas and learning from the work to kind of these outside art and music practice. So.
Yeah. Well, it's that thing of like, because you've continued practicing as a musician and artist, you're completely within those networks. And then when you started like Constant Flux, it's because you could recognise that you can help people create the work, but then also take it into other places that you had connections with. So you could only have done that because you were still part of all those networks. Yeah,
and I think that's like doing that, like so Constant Flux was like just booking gigs and tours and releasing records. There was no, even though within my work I did support people to make music, Constant Flux as an organisation didn't do any creative support. It was very much working with artists and the organisations that supported them to present their work, like a booking agent basically. And it's funny because I would get a lot of like people contacting me about like sort of Constant Flux bands, like bands that the organisation supported, and we didn't do any of that. It was just very much about like creating a platform for these musicians to sort of like present themselves on, which I don't think happens very like that much in learning disability arts. It's like everything within an organisation, they're like, the support, and then they release the records, and then they book all the shows, and they sort of manage the bands, and it's rare that you get that kind of separation that happens in sort of like mainstream music. So that's kind of like the gap I was trying to fill, of just like seeing amazing artists and not interfering at all with the creative side of things, but just finding the right platform for people to encounter them on. So so moving on to the pamphlet itself, so you know, you've gained years and years of experience across many different mediums and lots of different functions, and the pamphlet, as mentioned already, started out as a manifesto. So I wanted to know, why did you decide to write the manifesto in the first place? You know, where did that come from, this idea of kind of like putting down your wisdom in some kind of written form, but then also why the form of a manifesto specifically? Why wasn't it immediately an essay or some other form? So firstly, why did you write it, and secondly, why a manifesto? I think the reason why I wrote it was because I liked talking about it. I think really like deeply about the work. And I think when I say the work, it's just like basically supporting people with learning disabilities. But it's a lot more than that. And I talk a lot about it with other people that do it. And every like interaction and session and event, I think a lot, like I overthink a lot of things, but I think a lot about it. And I think sometimes, because I do talk to a small sort of group of people and think a lot about it, I just sort of assume that everybody's on the same page as me. And sometimes I'd end up having like conversations with people that weren't like involved in the world of that work, and they would find it interesting. And I think having more and more of those conversations, I realised that there was a lot to sort of extract from these experiences, which could relate to people that don't do the work, don't even make music, don't even sort of engage in creative activities. There are just sort of things to learn. And I think quite specifically, I wanted to communicate to, like, I guess the DIY scene, which, you know, is I've been a part of for a very long time, playing in bands, like putting on gigs, making zines, doing all that sort of stuff, making records. And I guess I saw it as like, it's very on, you know, it has a lot of political and social issues on its sleeve. You know, it's like fiercely sort of anti-homophobic, anti-racist, feminist, but I never saw like anti-ableist. Mm-hmm. And disability wasn't necessarily something that was talked about a lot. And I think, you know, a lot of places that, you know, we played would be in basements, and they're tiny and actually like really stressful environments. Like we even had friends that wouldn't be able to come to some of our shows because they had strobe lights, and mm-hmm. It was just, you know, lots of things. And I think there's a tendency for that scene to communicate to itself a lot, which again is another access thing. Whereas there's people that could really benefit from being in a different, more accepting space, but never find out about it and never sort of learn of its existence. And so I guess it was like, I didn't want it to be like, you know, like a preachy sort of thing, but maybe just the way in the way that DIY for me, you know, sometimes it gets described as like an atom splitting moment, when it's this like realization of like, oh, you don't need to wait for people, you can just do it, just do it yourself. Like I think when I first heard of the like social model of disability, that was like an atom splitting moment for me, in that, like, which the social model of disability is where it's the environment and your surroundings that disable you, rather than the disability sort of is within you.
And you kind of extrapolate on that in the pamphlet.
Yeah, so I guess for me it was like, you know, because that totally shifts the way that you can think about the world, because it's things are being done to you. And the one of the big things with it is like, when you're not being disabled by the world, you don't notice. And I think for me it was like trying to combine those two things, like the sort of I can't think of anything apart from like the go-getter attitude of DIY, but then also this kind of like trying to shift perceptions of what people have, and the tools and materials that they have that surround them, that they might take for granted or like be invisible to them in a weird way.
So the manifesto initially was meant to be this tool.
Yeah.
In a very kind of concise form.
Yeah.
Specifically for people outside of learning disability arts
Yeah.
and people in kind of DIY music scene.
Yeah.
But it's obviously gone wider than that because it's been shared by people in music generally, people in different arts, you know, kind of in literature, and just people within the arts in general and outside of that, where people seem to have found something in that message in that very succinct way. The actual manifesto looks really nice and is a very appealing kind of bit of art.
Yeah, I mean, that was really specific in terms of the communication. You know, I laid it out like I would a zine. You know, I used a typewriter and lecture set and cut and paste.
And it's replicated in the pamphlet.
Yeah. Because I wanted to communicate with the entire like object. And I guess like the actual production of it was almost like this was maybe what I was thinking about when I was first thinking about it, was like writing down just these experiences that I'd had and kind of the things that I'd learned from them.
Yeah, so the pamphlet then.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say the manifesto came to be because some friends of ours who work at the Goldsmiths music department were starting like a small press on pamphlets, and they had a creative restriction where it had to be like, there was an open call for it, and the creative restriction on it was it had to be like one sheet of A4. And I really like creative restrictions, and I applied. I basically put in like, it's going to be a 10-point manifesto covering these things, and then they said, yeah, that sounds great. And I was like, okay, so that write DIY is privilege that's been in my list of notes for years, never been done. It's like, okay, I've got to do it now. And it was actually like way harder to get it to like 10 points, because it's not 10 points, it's 13, and to condense it was way harder than I thought. But it was a really good exercise to get to the kind of the essence of what I had learned, and I think this then ended up becoming a lot better for it. But in terms of the format, I was really influenced by Sister Carita, who was an artist and a nun that worked in like the 70s, and she wrote this amazing manifesto of like basically how to like work at art school, and it really resonated with me, and I really liked the way it taught you so much. It didn't preach at you, it was like it made you feel empowered by what she said. It wasn't like you're doing this right or wrong, it's just like these sentences which just can make that shift, or like empower you to like want to change or like think about something differently. So I think that's why it's like wanted it from it. If I interrupted you, sorry.
No, I mean, I interrupted you. But that is what's very interesting about the manifesto form, is it is so different to any kind of other piece of writing, because really it is a tool of empowerment. It's not you saying, this is what I think, there you go. It's like its intention is to get other people to do the same, or it's to help other people have a guiding point of how to make real concrete changes. It's not saying this should be better without giving an example of what it could be. So it's in a way it is something that people can read and make a change tomorrow about the ways that they think about how they work with people, or the ways that they perceive the world, and that they themselves could do something about it.
I mean, that's like totally it. I guess the idea was, because a lot of people ask me like, how can I get involved, how can I do this, and I always I always struggled to kind of explain how you do get involved, and
without simplifying it, and without
and I think it's just like, one of the most important points I think is like the number 11, which is like turn up and keep turning up. sometimes when supporting people, being consistent is more impressive than being spectacular. And that just kind of speaks of throughout, I have the most incredible job and I love it, and it's really niche, and I sort of feel like I've definitely carved out that niche for myself, and it's almost like doesn't exist apart from where I get to do it. And people do ask me like how I got to that point, and I just don't have an answer apart from I just turned up, and I had opportunities came up, and then I sort of took them, and then I expanded on them, and and I think it's a journey, and it can be a really slow journey, but it's like totally worthwhile, and it's totally worth taking your time over it. And it's not, I think people want to make that change really instantly. It's like it's not instant. It is and then spending time with people, and things happen.
And things like patience and consistency are an integral part
of supporting people. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's you learn through the process of just like taking your time over things. And
then the pamphlet,
yes,
where you got to actually use anecdotes and kind of verbatim extracts from people you've worked with, and had experience with and worked with to create opportunities, and kind of amazing piece of music and music projects. And you were saying how this might be the ultimate form where it helped actually building on the manifesto into the pamphlet form. It's that it might be better for it, and the anecdotes in it are amazing. And I'm actually really jealous that you wrote this, because you're not a writer. This is the biggest. You're not I mean, you are a writer now. You are officially a writer, but there's something that's so effortless about it. But it's so it's so well written, and the anecdotes that you've chosen are so perfect at encapsulating the different points in the manifesto. And obviously you couldn't include everything.
No.
You had to be really choice with how you did it. So not wanting to dwell on how this is your kind of debut, but how difficult did you find writing the pamphlet, from going from a 13 kind of statement manifesto to a full-length work, did you must have found it quite affecting going over such a long period of time in your life and putting down these anecdotes, because some it is very funny, and some other things are quite hard hitting for somebody that maybe hasn't had any experience of working the way that you have. So how did you find it actually writing the pamphlet?
I mean, it's a really like interesting process. Like I really did actually enjoy it. Like just going over archives of stuff and little things I had written, and kind of engaging with people that I hadn't in a while. I think sort of throughout it is this kind of, I guess, the tension between that invisible, visible sort of thing, where I can't and I shouldn't speak for disability, because that's not my lived experience. But I wanted to speak of my experience of the people that I'd met, but not through the prism of like disability, but through the prism of just relationships. So that was really important to center people, to kind of try and get across some of what I'd experienced, in actually quite a short period of time. Kind of the way that the relationships I have with people, and the way I have like gotten to know them, and kind of what it's brought to me in my life, and sort of what I've learned through that sort of those friendships and relationships. And so sort of treading a quite a thin line. I didn't want to be like saccharine or like sentimental. I wanted it to be funny, but I wanted it also to kind of try and encapsulate some of the realities of, you know, the experiences that I've had. I guess, again, the sort of creative restrictions was good. Like, I made the decision quite early on to essentially take each of the points from the original 13-point manifesto and expand upon them. So that kind of helped me go to sleep. Helped me think about who I would talk about and experiences that I would talk about. Unfortunately, it meant that I couldn't talk about some people that I really wanted to, but it seemed to work quite well in terms of focusing, because I had a tendency to ramble.
Really?
I don't know if you've noticed. And so anything that helps me focus words is really useful. So also the format of rough trade books with the pamphlet, there was a limitation on number of pages, and then wanted it to be legible and all of this sort of stuff. It's just that is always really helpful for me, because I think when I first envisaged it many years ago, it probably would have been this nightmarish ramble, 1,000 pages or something. But
that might come later.
Yeah. It's appealing.
I don't know if I'll edit that one.
Yeah.
I will, don't worry.
Yeah. I don't know if that answered the question.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Could you, to kind of wrap up, could you name maybe one person or band or moment that couldn't make it into the pamphlet, and then maybe your ultimate recommendation for an album or a band that people should check out? That might be in the pamphlet or might not be.
Okay. I think, one thing I really wanted to include is kind of I guess I realised it ended up wasn't really relevant, but there's people that I would have liked to have talked about that I've known that have died very young, and kind of the sort of that reality of people's lives that I've sort of been lucky enough to sort of encounter. And there's one person, Sean, that I really want to talk about, that was he used to come to the Rock House a lot, which I talk about, and he wasn't in any creative supportive environment. He actually lived quite far away from where the Rock House was based, but his dad would bring him. They would travel quite far, and he would play guitar, and he would play in the Rock House band, which was this sort of improvised rock band that anybody that showed up and wanted to play could play in that band. And it kind of ended up becoming kind of quite central to that whole night. And he passed away, and it kind of, the only interactions I really had with him was on stage playing music, and I didn't have long periods of time with him, but the things that I did get to experience with him were life changing, and I think it's really plays into this sort of idea of value and worth and all this sort of stuff, where it made me really appreciate the way that somebody who I can just encounter a few times can completely change my life for the better. And there are other people who might be deemed more worthy by some in society, but that make my life a lot worse. But yeah, it didn't find its way in. But then on a slightly brighter side, there's somebody who's also sort of involved with the Rock House called Richard Rock and Roll, who I love, and he is just, yeah, complete force of nature. And I think I probably could write a whole book about Richard Rock and Roll. So he didn't make it in, but he's amazing. I love him.
And he played at a Saw Youth album launch, and we were his backing band.
Yeah, and again, completely improvised. I think what's interesting about him is, again, it's that the sort of the reverse challenge, whereas like a lot of people might perceive like supporting people with learning disabilities as this sort of power dynamic in a way, whereas like you're the dominant power, and you can do all these things that this like somebody else can't. And I think Richard Rock and Roll, like, really, he encapsulates so much of like what I hear from people when, say, for example, when they see him play. Like, he gets up on stage, like, with no rehearsals. Maybe that's the first time he's met his band, and he'll get up and he'll just like perform like there's no tomorrow. Like, the most confident sort of singer, front person you've ever seen. And so many people, like, when they see him perform, are like, I wish I could do that. And they're musicians. And when he supported us at our album launch, we were his backing band. He like completely like was engaged with the audience, chatting to them in between songs, like just going off on one. And then we played, and I don't think we maybe said like 5 words in between songs, and just didn't engage with people because I don't know.
Because we're incapable.
Well, just because of like the sort of social things that are disabling us from actually doing that, and whereas this desire to be like confident and exuding all this like stuff, but for whatever reasons we stay contained within ourselves when we play. So Richard Rock and Roll. And then if I could recommend one thing, it's a film called The Punk Syndrome that features PKN, Party Kurakan Nimi Paivat, and I think they're an amazing band. The music's amazing, but also encapsulated within that film, it tells you a lot about, say, the lives of people with learning disabilities in this beautiful, hilarious, chaotic way. So that's a very good primer for a lot of stuff. So
excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much. How was that?
Thank you. That was good. I think I've got to promote this. So me and Jen have just been talking about my pamphlet, D.I.Y's Privilege, a Manifesto, and this is the launch party that we're having right now. And it's out on Rough Trade Editions. It's number 36, and you can get it from the Rough Trade Books website, and you should buy it. And thank you for watching. Have a wonderful time. I hope you're all staying safe and and well. Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.